gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's November the 2nd, 2022. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined, as always, by managing editor Matt Shodell. And today we have the privilege of also adding our young, blossoming new writer, Azubi Charles, to the show. And Azubi, let's just start with you. Forget Matt. He's been having a rough week anyway. You're on the road. We'll just tell everybody you're on your way back. We sent you to IMG Academy, where you had the chance to visit with all of the guys that are committed to the Miami Hurricanes, and we'll be bringing you all that content here in the coming days. But you also had a chance to sit down with Billy Miller, the head coach at IMG, and have a real extensive interview where you were able to talk about Miami's growing pipeline to IMG. You were able to talk to him about all of these individual guys that are becoming Miami Hurricanes. Why don't you just share your impressions of that conversation and your visit to IMG in general?
Yeah, so my time at IMG was awesome. I spent the last few days there talking to players, like you mentioned, and head coach Billy Miller. And just I had to ask him about the growing bond between, Bradenton to Coral Gables and that pipeline. And he said the biggest thing that all the players are really liking is the communication and the real energy that they're getting from Mario Cristobal and that staff. And he just told me the guys that Miami's getting are all dogs and that are going to, be impact players. He especially mentioned Francis as a guy he thinks will come in day one and be a real impact guy for Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes.
He's got to be loving life, man. I mean, he's sitting there, he's coaching an all-star team. I mean, it's an all-star team. It's kids from all over the country, some of the best players in America, and he's sitting there coaching them, and they're really playing teams that really, for the most part, probably can't really match up with them so well. And man, maybe in all of our Knicks careers and Knicks lives, we could be head football coaches at IMG.
Yeah, that'll be nice. All the talent that he has over there, those guys are loving it too. And most of those guys that are committed to Miami, I think all of them are going to be early enrollees as well. So they're all excited to get on campus and just learn. Their biggest thing was the one to get on campus early and learn the Cristobal system earlier than all the other guys coming in the spring and the summer. So all those guys are really excited to get on campus too.
Man, it's coming fast. Matt, I mean, you talk about early enrollees. I mean, they're going to be here in 8 weeks.
Yeah, well, we'll recruiting's just part of it, but developing a pipeline to a program like IMG, to Miami Central, that's where it starts. Then Marcus will always said the developmental aspect comes in. So the first step's there. They have a great recruiting class already. They're developing the bonds at programs like IMG, St. Thomas, hopefully, American Heritage. They need to do more work there, obviously, and at Central they already have the connection too. So once you get those bonds formed, once the players come in, then you get to the next step, right? So they're at the first step, honestly, which is building the talent base of the roster. And then we're going to find out after that, what happens next, because you can't have one without the other. You can get all the top recruits. If you don't develop them, it's all for nothing. So they got to have it go hand in hand. And then, there's the culture has to be built. There's so much that goes into it. And Mario Cristobal always talks about the work. Azubi Charles is doing the work for all of you out there. But over the next 3 years, it's going to be Mario Cristobal is doing the work.
Well, Miami's always struggled at IMG, Azubi, and that's changing this year. In talking to all those guys and spending time with them, what kind of vibe were you getting about, just on their feelings on Miami and, how Miami has been able to, get its claws into IMG? Because, let's face it, these guys could go anywhere. I mean, I'm sure they're going to get great NIL with John Ruiz and all that stuff and Life Wallet. But Matt, don't say a word. No Life Wallet, no NIL, none of that today.
Nope.
But they're going to get good NIL from Life Wallet, I'm sure. But they would have gotten good NIL at any school they went to. So what impression, what vibe did you get from them on why Miami?
So the biggest thing that they mentioned was communication. I think with Jaden and Riley, they both mentioned to me that Mario Cristobal has been steadily recruiting them since the 8th grade, from when he was at Oregon to when he's at Miami. So them saying him being on their recruiting trail since 8th grade is just the biggest thing with them. And they just get that family vibe. With Francis, he was telling me it wasn't just his decision to come to Miami; it was a family decision. Having talking with his parents, all his relatives, Coach Joe Salve having a big part of it. Coach Mario Cristobal being so family oriented, and those guys just really have bought into what he's really preaching to them, and they're ready to continue to be developed at Miami. That's one really big thing that Riley mentioned too. He came to IMG to be developed and further his development in Miami, and he thinks there's no other place that can develop him more.
And so, like, for all you guys out there that are saying, like, wow, man, I want to be a Zuby and have this great job at CaneSport and get to go to IMG and hang out with all the great players and all that stuff. I think a Zuby, just so they understand that you really do have like a real job and it's not all roses. Maybe we'll tell the story of part 2 of your road trip. This is a Zuby's big road trip for CaneSport. So after he leaves, he spent a couple days at IMG and he drives over to Lakeland, figuring, let's go spend a little bit of time with Cormani McLean, number 2 player in the country, newly minted Miami commitment. Our subscribers at CaneSport would love to get to know Cormani McLean a little bit better, and nobody better to take that assignment than a Zuby. So Zuby drives from Brayton to the Lakeland, sits there through the entire practice because he was warned in advance that the coach at Lakeland will not take too kindly if you bother any of his players during practice. Zuby's totally perfectly behaved. He sits up in the stands. He watches the practice, then has a quick conversation with the coach, and then goes to have his big time with Cormani McLean, the hot new Miami recruit. What happened to Zuby?
Unfortunately, Mr. McLean has declined to further have interviews with reporters. So I got some good words from Coach Castle about him, but unfortunately, nothing from Cormani at this time. So hopefully, change of heart soon. We can get some good stuff from him. But as of now, nothing from Mr. McLean.
Well, that good stuff in the future is going to have to be by way of Zoom or something, because that was a one-shot deal, man. Zuby's not going back to Lakeland after that one. I can promise you that. Like, that was crazy. We have never, ever in all the years of CaneSport ever had anything even close to that happen. And I hope Cormani watches this, because what I would say is, look, this is a happy time in your life. I mean, it's not going to get better than this. You're getting ready to go play college football. You're going to play it at the University of Miami. You are going to have a lot of interviews. You're going to have a lot of media sessions, and there was no reason. I mean, Zuby drove all the way over there to see you, and man, he could have done the interview. He's going to have to be better than that when he gets to college. I'm sure he will.
Gary, honestly, Gary, it was your fault. I mean, that's the truth. So tell the whole story. How about?
What did I do?
You did not offer Cormani an NIL deal for the interview. You have NIL deals for
what?
NIL deal for Xavier Restrepo. No NIL deal for Cormani. What do you expect? It's Gary Ferman's fault, Zuby. I apologize on his behalf.
Yeah, all right. Zuby, I promise. From now on, we will do NIL deals with every recruit that we ever go to. Matt, what the heck is that white stuff you're drinking?
It's amazing. It's my new drink. You guys out there know, I've gone from the liberal chai lattes through my phase with these weird living organism drinks. Now I've found my new favorite thing, which is lemon ginger shots. Bye, Zuby. What'd you do with Zuby?
I don't know where he went.
I guess he figured his segment was over. We stopped talking about recruiting. He's like, I'm out. I'm done. I don't blame him. I don't want to be on this show either. Oh, he's back.
He's on his way back.
Yeah, lemon ginger shots, or that's my thing. It's delicious.
Zuby, have you ever had a lemon ginger shot?
Zuby's Cormani McLeaning us. That's what he's doing.
I've never had one of those. No, I can't say I have.
Matt's sitting here drinking lemon ginger shots this morning. What does that give you the energy to get through the day?
It's the only thing that gets me through the day and talking to you.
I thought that was a warm glass of milk for a second. Then he said that I was.
If you're drinking milk that's orange, Azubi, we got problems.
Is that orange? It doesn't look orange on camera. I didn't.
Oh yeah, it does look like milk on camera.
It absolutely is.
Actually, to me, it's yellow. Huh? Look at that.
All right, so keeping it on point here. So you will get to read a lot of Azubi stories the next few days from his road trip, starting today with the story with Coach Miller, talking about IMG, how Miami's making inroads at IMG, and discussing all of those individual players that are going to be Miami Hurricanes here in 8 weeks. And then in the next few days, we will have stories with all those guys. Azubi did some 100-yard walks, his new trademark feature. So we'll get to know those guys some of those guys a little bit off the field, what they're like, what kind of music they listen to, all that kind of stuff. So you have a lot to look forward to from Azubi's big road trip this week. And, that'll be coming up here over the next few days. All right. We have other stories to talk about today. This is a busy day at CaneSport.com. Our resident historian, Jim Martz, did some digging and wrote a column about what makes this Miami FSU rivalry so historic. So make sure that you check that out today. And then we also, over the last week or so, we've been bringing you deep looks into the future at each position at Miami. Today, we dive hard into the defensive back position. And Matt Shodell, that'll take me to you, unfortunately. And the Miami defensive back position is one of the more intriguing spots on the roster, just for a couple reasons. One, the expectations that some of those guys brought into the season, the fact that some have and some have not, probably more not than have, met those expectations, the number of players that they have on scholarship at those spots, and what the future might hold as the recruiting at that position looks like it's on the road to being really, really good, and what that might mean for some of those guys on the roster right now at Miami, Matt, with the transfer portal looming in the month of December. And I know my opinion on this is that the defensive back position might be more active than people think in the transfer portal, because there's a lot of guys there that I don't know what their playing prospects are going to be at Miami with the upgrade that's taking place in recruiting.
I mean, well, first of all, you lost me at the word unfortunately. I've talked to Matt Shodell, unfortunately. I stopped listening after that. Then you use the word transfer portal, which doesn't exist, okay? It's free agency, all right? And yeah, they could use some free agents, for sure. Why not? If you got the money to spend, you spend it on the free agent market. But in terms of returning talent, very thin at cornerback. Going to be a little tough to get top safety recruits simply because you got two safeties that are returning that are, future stars, if not already on their way there or there in some people's opinions. So we'll be here possibly for 2 more years. So it's hard to convince guys to come in and sit for 2 years, hypothetically. But yeah, I mean, the defensive back position is so important. And that's why with them having 4 already, it is 4, right? Is it 3 or 4? Are we anyway, whatever it is, I think it might be 3. But there will be 4, okay? Gary Ferman and Matt Shodell put in their predictions. Azubi Charles has not figured out how to work at the website yet, but he will put in his prediction for another cornerback to come into the class. And it's going to be probably the top cornerback class in the country, if not one of the top cornerback class in the country. And that's how you build. This is not for next year. This is a 2 to 4 year process. We talked about it with Azubi before, how the first step is getting the recruits in, and after that, it takes a while, and they're fulfilling the first step. So to me, it's not that important. We discussed it for, I think, 25 minutes earlier today. The defensive back.
Yeah, we do. We have a separate video.
Yeah, you guys can tune into
that feature. So yeah, we won't get too long-winded on the subject.
Yeah, you can tune into that. But my point is, everything we said on that video, just ignore it because it doesn't matter. It's about 2 to 4 years from now, and all we talked about is the guys that are here and the guys who are signed. It's going to matter. Free agency. It's going to matter who they sign in the next class. It's going to matter how everything pans out, how they're developed. So check back in 2 years, everybody. Until then, thanks for watching.
Well, Azubi, you're a former receiver, so you've probably been sitting there watching these games this year from a little bit different point of view than certainly Matt Shodell drinking his lemon ginger shots here after he utters every 5 words. So you got to be sitting there probably thinking, oh man, I would have loved to run a fade route on that guy. But then you watch Tyreek make the play on the fade, and you're probably thinking, I would have faked the fade and run a quick slant. So you're, from your point of view, what have you seen from the defensive back position at Miami this year?
I've seen some good and obviously some bad with the position too. But obviously, when Matt mentioned the transfer portal free agency, I feel like what Mario did with that defensive line, bringing in all those guys, and you see the impact that they've made. I feel like that's just another opportunity to kind of revamp or add to the recruiting class that's going to come in with that defensive back position. And then also speaking with some of the recruits, their biggest thing seeing that defensive back group is, hey, I potentially have, a good opportunity to come in early because of their struggles earlier in the year. But obviously I've seen some good and bad with the position group. And I've honestly seen some development in them with Tyreek, with DJ coming along. Cam had a really good game without James and, things like that.
All right. We've got others
Finally, somebody in the show I could talk to actually understands football, Gary. You're going to run a fade and turn it into a slant? That's an interception, bro. The quarterback's going to throw the ball to the pattern that's supposed to be run.
I said fake the fade, and instead
the fade was what was called.
No, I understand, but they also could have run a route where they faked outside.
You told Azubi to fake the fade, which was the play call, and turned into a slant when the quarterback's still going to throw the ball to the fade, genius.
Azubi, tell him that there are pass routes where the receiver fakes like he's going to run a fade and then cuts to the inside.
But that wasn't the play call.
Azubi's run that 100 times in his life. No comment?
No, he's not going to comment. Because Gary, when you're wrong, he's not going to say anything because you're sending him the check, not me. When he's silent, it means you were wrong, Gary Ferman.
Azubi, tell him.
No, he's not going to tell me.
Tell him that you could show fade and then run a slant off that look.
Wow.
The release and all that good stuff. The route tree is a beautiful thing that you can always add things to. So
that's right. You can always get creative with your route trees. There you go. You hear that, Matt Shodell?
Azubi, sit in the dark if I'm right.
Kind of like
you sit in the dark. I was right.
Kind of like people can benefit from NIL, okay? Like they kind of go hand in hand. Route trees, NIL. All right, we got a lot more to talk about this morning, but first, let's hear from our friends at Life Wallet.
Growing up in Australia was unreal. I grew up in a small fishing town where I kind of had the freedom to go running around, go fishing, and all that stuff. From there, I moved to the city where I didn't really have as much freedom to run around, so I got really heavily involved into sports. And that kind of progressed on towards playing at a semi-professional level here in Australia and then moving forward to playing college level football in America currently. I think maybe my biggest inspiration is kind of looking back at the life I had, just working construction for 8 years. And sometimes I sit back and kind of have to realise how far I've come since putting on the high vis and throwing a hammer around, looking back and seeing how far I've come from then. Going to uni, getting a degree, onto my masters, playing football at an elite level. I think just going back and seeing how far I've come, it made me realise that I can keep going, play at a professional level because I've already come this far. Looking back and seeing how proud everyone is here, back in my hometown, and just that keeps motivating me.
All right, so we have a couple really cool football stories in addition to what we've already talked about that I wanted to bring up. And the first was a deep dive that we took into Leonard Taylor. And we've talked so much, guys, on this show this entire season about Leonard Taylor, how when you take him and Darrell Jackson together, it's one of the best defensive tackle combos in the ACC. And then we would get to Sunday morning and we would look at the play reps and say, man, Leonard Taylor only played 23 reps yesterday, and we were commenting all year, like, these guys are not playing enough. The reps got up to 30 at Virginia. But what Matt found when he dove into all the grades and statistics and everything was that Leonard Taylor is playing at a level as well as anybody in the country, almost really. And Matt even did some comparisons looking at guys that got drafted high in the NFL draft over the last couple years. And when you compare how they were grading in their seasons that got them very high up in the draft with what Leonard Taylor is doing here at Miami. In a lot of cases, Leonard Taylor is playing better than those guys, Matt. And it just goes to show you, like, what we have been saying all year. Believe it or not, both of us in this case have been spot on. And I think, Kevin Steele did make a good point the other day when he said that sometimes they get caught on their reps, depending on the circumstances of the game. Like they might put a guy in and there might be 3 straight 3 and outs or something. And so he's not getting a lot of reps, even though he's impacting the game. And then they might put the backups in and it might be a 8-play drive or something along those lines. So I get it. Like, it probably is not the easiest thing in the world to manage those reps. But I think you and I are totally in concert for once in our lives that Leonard Taylor probably should be on the football field a little bit more.
Yeah. Yep. The research I did for the story on Leonard Taylor was remarkable. A remarkable story. One of the greatest.
It actually was. I got to admit,
greatest stories ever written about the Miami Hurricanes ever. I mean, no, but seriously, what I did was I didn't just want to write a story about Leonard. These canned interviews are super annoying. Even the quotes from the coaches are super annoying. So I said, what can I do differently? So I just made up a bunch of quotes, made up a bunch of information, and I wrote the story that way. I mean, that's the best way to write a story. And the information I did not make up was this. The guy who was taken number 3 in the NFL draft, who is essentially the exact same height and weight as Leonard Taylor, okay, 6'3", 305 pounds approximately. That was Quinnen Williams from Alabama, who was taken number 3 by the Jaguars in 2019. I said, you know what, just for fun, because I know Leonard's not playing a lot of reps for stupidity reasons, in my opinion. Let's see what his production is per rep based on the Pro Football Focus numbers. And, Pro Football Focus keeps track of pressures, has different sack numbers than the actual stats. All they do it a little differently than the official statistics, which is fine because it's still apples to apples because they're doing Williams's numbers and they're doing Taylor's numbers, so it's fine. So I broke it down and I looked at the number of reps that Williams played on that Alabama team, the number of reps that Taylor's played, and I divided their production based on the reps. And I had no idea what I was going to find. I assumed I would find that Williams, was much better when it comes to tackle for loss per rep they played, sacks per rep played, and pressures per rep played, because it makes sense. The guy's the number 3 pick in the NFL draft, and he's got a lot of defensive linemen who are really talented on that Alabama team playing next to him, so it's hard to double team any interior guy, right? As it turns out, Leonard Taylor is more productive in all 3 of those categories per rep that he has played. He just hasn't played enough reps to have these remarkable numbers. If he played the same amount of reps and had the same production he's had, which maybe he wouldn't, maybe he'd be too tired. I don't know. Williams apparently wasn't too tired to play most of the games. I actually broke that down too. I looked at the percent they played, and that was interesting in itself because Leonard Taylor, let me see if I can find it real quick. Leonard Taylor, I want to say, played in, what is he, like 38% of the reps, 40% of the reps, something like that. Williams played in 64% of Alabama's reps, and that was despite Alabama winning, I want to say, 10 of their 15 games. Yeah, it was 10 of their 15 games Alabama won by 29 or more points. So when Williams was playing 64% of the time, he would have played 80% of the time if these weren't blowouts where he's just taken out of the game. So that's what I've been saying. I've been saying you play your best players on defense 80% of the time. Again, going back to the days where guys would just get IVs at halftime. I mean, that's what you do in big games. You don't just rest everybody all the time that are your best players. So anyway, look, I would like to see Leonard play 80% of the time. I don't see why he can't. Apparently, Kevin Steele says it's impossible. It can't be done.
You want to see Leonard Taylor on an IV Saturday night against Florida State.
I want to see every Miami defensive player who's great on an IV at halftime, at the end of the game, whatever, man. Because you know what? That's how you know they gave their all. That's how you know.
Hey, I remember Dan Morgan.
What are you saving yourself for? FSU is it. The season's already a trash can of a mess. I mean, the season looks like what Gary Ferman talks about all the time. It's just nonsense what's been happening. And it has to change at some point. And you know what? Maybe the change will be beating FSU and getting this team to understand what it takes to beat FSU. And guess what? What it takes to win games like this is giving every ounce of what you've got And every ounce of what you got is not playing 38% of the time, so you're well rested in case there's 8 overtimes in the game. Okay, that's just my opinion.
I remember vividly in a Miami FSU game, Dan Morgan running in to get an IV. Really, I think it was like in the third quarter. Like he was just totally done. Needed a little pick me up in there in the locker room, and it's that kind of game usually. And Matt's right. You got to have your best players on the field if you're going to win it. So hopefully, with Leonard Taylor's performances continuing to elevate, the coaches when they're sitting there monitoring counts will make sure he's on the field more.
Let me add one more thought. Sorry, Azubi, I know you haven't had much to say in the segment, but that's just how Gary and I roll. Like, you're not going to get to talk, okay? That's the bottom line. When you come on this show, Azubi, you got to interrupt, because that's the only way to speak. But don't interrupt me, interrupt Gary, okay? So here's what I'm going to say. Kevin Steele wants to save his defensive players so they're fresh in the second half. What Kevin Steele maybe look, he's been coaching forever. He gets it, okay? I'm not going to ever say I know more than him. But Miami struggled in the first half. Miami struggled getting off to fast starts. If you're resting your best defensive lineman on the third series or second series of the game, and FSU scores a touchdown on that series, well, Leonard Taylor might have had a fumble, strip sack, difference-making play in that series. Like, we wouldn't know. To me, you've got to start fast in this game. You've got to have your best players playing in the first quarter and second quarter. Not, okay, let's just try to keep it close, keep our guys rested, and hope in the third and fourth quarter we'll be the better team. Like, yeah, you want to be the better, fresher team in the third and fourth quarter, but not at the expense of being behind by 2 touchdowns in the first half because you wanted to rest everyone for the second half. You don't want to play from behind in this game, especially against this team. You need to get out to a fast start in this game, especially with the mentality of this Miami team, not thinking they're real good, having all sorts of issues in games where they struggle early. Like, you know, that's my belief. You know, I know Kevin Steele and coaches always think differently than reporters, and they're probably right, but like, you know, it's my job to speculate on what I would do, and I know what I would do. That's what I would do.
Yeah, you'd play Leonard Taylor.
That's the Matt Shodell defense. play my best players until they need IVs. Then they can take a break. You need an IV? You got a series off. Go get your IV. Come on back afterwards.
Azubi, as a charter member of the Leonard Taylor fan club, you have any thoughts on this subject?
I love when Leonard Taylor's on the field. I think in that Virginia game, he had a huge impact. There was one play after Virginia got to, I believe, the 2-yard line. I thought Leonard Taylor called the play for Virginia, how quickly he was in the backfield to blow it up. And he has a big sack in the overtime, too. Just his presence on that field in those trenches along that defensive line it's not, you know, it's different. I feel like every play he's first one off the ball in the backfield disrupting. If he's not getting the sack, he's veering the quarterback and the running back right into another play. So I feel like his impact is very much needed for Miami. Obviously, he needs a break here and there, but just try to keep him on the field as much until he needs that quote-unquote IV.
By the way, do you want to know something? Do you want something really ridiculous? This is so annoying, okay? And I'm not going to name names, okay? But the Miami Sports Information Department is they handle Miami side, right? When you're playing away game at Virginia, Virginia handles the official game book and they publish the game book. They had a mistake in the game book. In the Miami statistics, there was a mistake. And Miami just let it go. You know, that's okay. Because I know, I'm not going to name the reporter, but a reporter from Miami literally told the Miami SID, there's a mistake that they made in their game book. If you want to have them corrected, because I want to have it corrected in my story. And Miami's like, nah, we're good.
We're good.
You know what the mistake was? Did you guys notice the mistake or not?
They had Jacurri throwing 3 passes and he only threw 1.
Yep. They had Jacurri 0 for 3 instead of 0 for 1. And I actually corrected my own story that said 0 for 1 because as a reporter, you have to go by the official game book, which is ridiculous because I saw it with my own eyes, but you still have to use the official statistics because like that's, as a reporter, what you have to do. It's ridiculous. And they won't fix it. They won't fix it. They were told about it and they said, whatever. Like that annoys me because I'm a numbers guy.
Okay, I'm sure you annoy them too. So
I didn't even say a word to them.
It's even. I know I annoy them.
I know you do. That's why I didn't say a word because they help out enough when I need help. So the last thing I need to do is really annoy them like you do. Azubi's really on good terms with them because he's just started. He hasn't annoyed them enough yet.
Azubi hasn't annoyed anybody.
Azubi should be the one asking the Miami Sports Federation for favors for us, not us anymore.
I walk around at the games with Azubi. I feel like I'm with the mayor of Miami now. After a few months at CaneSport, he knows everybody, recognizes. It blows my mind. Like Azubi, you recognize everybody, which is like I'm terrible at that sometimes, but. Anyway, all right. So we got a couple other things today on some of the other sports. The baseball schedule came out, and I know a lot of you are looking forward to going to Marklight Stadium this season, drinking milkshakes and watching some games. So you could start penciling those games in on your calendar. And we also are continuing our build up towards next Monday when basketball season starts at the U with a doubleheader. Women's game 4:00, men's game I think 7:30, and we take a look today at a young freshman who he might be young, but he's not small. He's the big guy on the team. His name is Favor Air. Really cool kid. You guys are gonna really love him. I sat down and did a pretty good extensive interview with him, and his personality really shone through. And I really think that you guys are going to like it. So make sure you take a look at that Favor Air feature today.
You know what? I have a quick question for Azubi. Azubi, unlike Gary, you've played football at a very high level, high school, a good program, right? In high school, correct?
We did our thing.
Okay. So if you take a 7-foot player off the basketball team who can jump, and you put him in the middle of the special teams line as a walk-on, although I don't know if you could do that actually and have him count as a walk-on once they play. But if you have an open spot on the roster, you have him stand right in the middle behind the whoever lines up across from the center, right? And he just jumps as high as he can when they kick the ball. And raises his giant arms up. Would that have any effect, and perhaps like the Too Tall Jones effect? Do you think that would work or not?
I tell him stick to the court. It's different when you do that crossover from the hardwood to the gridiron, man. Some guys have that grit in them for that.
Man,
I'll tell you one guy on this basketball team before I finally get to ask Azubi what he thought of Favor Air when we were watching him in practice together. But Norchad Omir, that guy would be a monster in football. Don't you think, Azubi?
Yeah, he's a big dude. That's the first thing I said. I was like, this guy would be a really good defensive end for this team.
Yes.
For the team.
Defensive end or tight end, he'd be unbelievable.
Tight end. Those guys never wind up being good in the trenches. But tight end, yeah. Those basketball players can be great tight ends, a lot of them.
Yeah, and I don't think this guy's going to end up being an NBA player because he's just he's not tall enough. But he would be very wise to go the Jimmy Graham route and switch over to football after he plays his final year of basketball.
Don't you mean the Rafael Akbajori route? Who's Jimmy Graham? I never heard of Jimmy Graham.
Didn't work out quite as well there.
He made it to the NBA. He made it to the NFL. Didn't he?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
I'm right now.
But so Azubi, before we go, Favor Air, he looked pretty good when we had the chance to watch him in practice.
Yeah, what I loved about Favor Air was his length on the defensive side of the ball. When he was in the paint, he was going up against Norchad, and he did a reasonable good job for being a freshman against a bigger guy, stronger guy like Norchad. But his length on the defensive side of the ball was really good. And he was really aggressive, too. He was kind of getting a little chippy with his teammates, but you love to see that early in the season, guys really going hard in practice.
And this basketball team, folks, is going to be really, really good. They had an exhibition against Florida last week. I heard they played pretty well and beat the Gators, and they won their other exhibition against not a really good team. They're going to come out of the gates fast. They've been practicing really, really well. I encourage all of you, just like I did last year, and they end up going all the way to Elite Eight. Get behind Miami basketball this year. Follow this team. You will get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and maybe it'll replace some of the heart palpitations that you've gotten being a Canes football fan so far this year.
By the way, it was Eric Swope. That's
yeah.
He's the one who made the NFL.
He made it for a brief time, a little cup of coffee
with a cult.
All right, that's going to do it for our show this morning. Thank you so much for starting your day out with us. Hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube. Subscribe to CaneSport.com so that we can afford to send Azubi on more road trips, because you're going to love the stories that he puts together here off of his trip to IMG. And we'll just pretend that he never went to Lakeland High to see Cormani McLean in 3/4 of a day of his life that he will never get back.
Hey, good job dealing with Gary today, Zuby. Congratulations. You do a much better job than me. You stay very calm. You listen to his nonsense. Fantastic job.
Thank you.
All right. So for Zuby Charles and Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you once again for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.